Hi, my name is McQueeney, and I am the President and COO of Bravehearts. And we're based out of Illinois. We service veterans from across the country. I personally have been working with veterans for about the last 9 years. I am a PATH Master Level instructor, and today I'm going to present to you on the top 10 questions from centers about veteran programs. I often get a lot of phone calls and emails and texts and so forth, and so I just thought we would start going through some of the most common inquiries we get. First one I want to talk to you about is, how did you all get started servicing veterans? We were blessed that we had a couple of individuals on our board, actually our founders, who had some inroads at the VA hospitals. Mind you, this was back in 2007, so there wasn't a lot on equine therapies and activities back then. But here's the gist. We began educating our VA hospitals. We work with VA hospitals currently in both Illinois and Wisconsin, and we did everything and anything we could just to start to go to them with information and ideas in who we wanted to serve and how we wanted to serve them. In the beginning, we really were trying to attend any veteran fairs, expos, anything that the VA hospitals were offering in workshops or job fairs or any community events. We were going there, we were sitting at booths, we were handing out pamphlets and brochures and business cards, and really just trying to pay our dues in a sense. A lot of our mission back then was even just thinking about even if we could just get one veteran. So I don't want to discourage you. I know it certainly takes a lot of time to attend events, but if you can go in with that idea, even if we can get one veteran and even just start to concentrate there, it will grow exponentially. And then secondly, how we really started servicing veterans was listening to what veterans wanted and needed, and sometimes those can be two very different things. And by that I mean really understanding who veterans are and their needs of why and how they're coming to your farms, to your programs, to your centers. So be mindful of that. Are they going to your farms because they need a place that is peaceful? Are they going to your farms or your centers to meet other peers? Are they going to your programs to do more riding or grooming activities and so forth? And so we really try to start there, and then on our planning and agendas since then, we try to add about one program a year. Again, listening to the veterans and their feedback and where they're at, and try to develop rolling out one new program a year. And again, it's all geared towards feedback and what their ideas have been. Second question that I want to talk about is, how did you get in with the VAs? So again, now in 2018, there's some great research that is out. Taking that information and sharing it and presenting it, designing literature and material about who you are and what you have to offer. Obviously, being a PATH center, having individuals that do have credentials and certifications is a wonderful thing. Oftentimes we try to get even therapists or faculty from VA hospitals out to our farms. That usually has to happen before they're ready to bring a group of individuals. Sometimes we have to go to them. Sometimes we take our horses to the VA hospitals. We work with any department. We try to stay really open and become creative with whether it's working with rec therapists or art departments, homeless units, spinal cord units, traumatic brain injury units, whatever. We even work with a blind center at a VA hospital. However, we can accommodate that particular group. And it's not a cookie cutter format. It's not like we can do one type of programming that works across the board. A lot of times we, over the years, have tried to develop and learn what works for a group of individuals that are dealing with TBIs and what works for a group of individuals who are coming from our blind center. We might utilize different horses, we might utilize different instructors, we might utilize different volunteers, we might utilize different lesson plans. It's really paying careful attention to the feedback, and just like it is with all of us who work with horses, working with veterans is a lot about feel. You have to be patient with your VA hospitals, and you have to understand going into it they could have some turnover there. And understanding that you might have an inroad, you might have a great contact with somebody there, and then perhaps they're gone. And understanding to a lot of times as we're trying to get inroads, we're trying to meet with more than one person there. So in case someone does leave, we can have a fallback, and you don't have to necessarily start all over again. We try to create materials that are, again, formatted for those particular units within the VA hospitals. Same thing for giving presentation, really understanding their roles and their goals that each VA wants to do. We work with a lot of different VA hospitals and a lot of different units within each of those VA hospitals, and understanding each of them and what their true needs are is really important. As we're trying to educate the VA hospitals on potentials of programming, we're also trying to give a wide variety of options. And I know this is hard for some centers and programs who are just starting out, and it's okay to do one thing and do it really well. But if you do want to grow and add individuals, you're going to determine that you're going to have more options, and perhaps discovering more benefits that your program, that your farm, that your center can really lend itself nicely with. For example, one of our farms has a great ambiance to it, a great atmosphere, and so we've determined that it's a really special place that is completely conducive to retreats. So just kind of thinking at what you have, and then thinking about what could be options with your facilities and with your horses and with your staff that you have available. Another important thing is just making sure that you stay in your lanes of industry professionalism. So meaning if we have a mental health group that comes out, and understanding if we're going to do the horse component and the mental health therapist wants to take on their mental health role, then they will do the time with the individuals afterwards, and we'll focus on our time with the horses and that horsemanship piece. We try to really respect the VA hospitals and the credentials that they have and what they're bringing to the table, a tremendous amount of expertise, and making sure that we work with what we can do. Just like we wouldn't want them to come in and teach with the horses, we want to make sure that we understand that they have the relationships with the patients. And it's going to be not just before they get to your centers, but also after. And then working with we make sure that we have the right paperwork and that our accreditation meets your VA hospital's needs. And that can vary state to state. I've had a couple of really interesting requests from VA hospitals that have needed certain things, rabies vaccinations on horses, all the way to deworming protocols on horses, to as far as our vaccination program for our horses and so forth. So it can be very diversified what their needs are, but making sure that you can provide that across the board. And I think that's what's so beautiful about PATH, is because a lot of what you may get asked to provide to a VA hospital is likely, if you're a premier accredited center, something that you've already installed as a standard. Okay. This is a big one that I get regularly. How do you get funding? So it's about being creative. It's about being, I don't want to say relentless, but sometimes if somebody tells me no, I try to just let it roll off me and think it's kind of a not now. Making sure that you're not asking for money, but you're listening for money, that you're thinking about where you could possibly go. So we really have a huge spectrum that we're trying to locate dollars to keep our programs at no cost for every veteran who comes to us. And that's our board's philosophy. That's the culture that we've created at Bravehearts. I know not everyone has that option to do, but for our culture it works. But that means that we are tirelessly committed to raising those dollars. How do we do it? Through donor relations, board relations, community members, volunteers, and to me, it's a donation of time, treasure, or talent. So it might not always be a check, but in-kind goods to me are just as important, whether it's horses or equipment or footing or a truck or a trailer, or those are big ticket items. But what I'm saying is thinking about each gift and how it can be meaningful to your program. We are constantly soliciting grants and foundations. We have a grant database that we use, and that grant database we can try to identify not just different parts of the country, but for particular programs. It gives us a lot of insight, and from there we can write LOIs, letters of inquiries, trying to get our foot in the door with certain foundations and grants that do have to give you an invite before you're allowed to write an application. We try to solicit a lot of local business support. For example, earlier this year, we wrote letters to every member on our Chamber of Commerce. Not only, even though we've been around for 16 years, still just constantly letting people know about what we do and possibly, if they'd like to help, how they can help, giving them options. One of the comments that I hear a lot of times is people say, we didn't know you existed, and they live right across the street from us or down the road or whatnot. It's inevitable. It's going to be constant, continual. However long you've been in business, you're going to constantly be trying to broaden your reach of individuals. And again, support, time, treasure, talent. It could be coming in. It could come in all those volunteers that you're going to need to muck stalls, to sidewalk, to go out and plan a fundraiser. Word of mouth is critical. We really try to make sure that even though it's a barn, and even though we like to have fun, and even though we're committed to doing good work, it's a business. And we really try to make sure that our reputation is very important to us, and we look at being a nonprofit is really being a business. And just because we're in a barn and we can have fun doesn't mean that we have to be a well-oiled machine with a really solid foundation. And that word of mouth is critical. Life is short. I'm all about if we can have times where, people can come together and find common ground. And if you do have to part ways with someone for something or another, hopefully you can do it in a professional manner. Press and media is important. Again, you're going to spend lots and lots of time trying to secure them. They might change their minds. They might not be able to make it. Breaking news might happen or get in the way. You might do 5 articles with the newspaper or a magazine, and you don't get anything out of it. And then you might do one, and all of a sudden you're getting a whole lot of feedback. So my opinion on that is no press or media is too small or too large for us. We're going to try to do our best, and we treat them all the same. Meaning if the press or media comes out to our farm, we're going to try to prepare ourselves, making sure our arenas are groomed and our crew is wearing professional gear, and our saddles are oiled and our horses are well groomed. And again, just making sure that you are branding yourself in a very professional manner. And just remember this too, we're all representing one another, right? So we're all in this together, and it's important that we all represent our centers properly because it reflects on all of us. Online donations, we have options like that are set up through our different websites or our social media. We have an annual giving campaign. We have once a year we do a Christmas card with an ask, and we do usually a New Year's letter that's a big thank you. We have an assortment of event planning, all kinds of friend-raisers we call them, just trying to get people to attend. Nowadays is so hard to get people to leave their houses. So sometimes if you can do it in a casual approach, get them to attend your event, and then maybe when they're there, then they'll learn about what you do, and maybe they'll give you a donation then, or maybe it might come, 6 months later at the end of the year. But working it and understanding that that all those options are important. And again, sorry, going back to that, let me just add one more thing. Making sure that you have a wide variety for people to give. So don't just sell, $2 lemonade, and don't just ask for $10,000 gifts. You have to figure out how to stagger those gifts so that you can reel in the $100 donor, or you can reel in the $500 donor, or you can reel in the $1,000 donor, or you can reel in the $2 donor. And again, a lot of those are all growing ways. A lot of times you're going to start with the lemonade, and you're going to move on to the t-shirt, and then you're going to move on to maybe sponsoring a horse show for $100 and so forth. And so just giving people options of where to come at that is comfortable for where they're at with their pocketbooks. Okay, here's another question. How do you keep veterans returning? We pride ourselves not only as trying to recruit veterans and try to let them come to the program and get comfortable and get acclimated, and then we're trying to give them options while they're there. And we're trying to make it progressive and innovative, because we don't want to have people get bored or stagnant. And that goes across the board, not just for veterans. Again, that's a little bit of our culture. That's how we feel about for our volunteers, and that's how we feel about our staff as well. So at Brave Hearts, we have lots of different types of programming. One of our very first programs that we started out in the very beginning was Drill Team, and that came about just because a couple of veterans said, hey, we don't want to go other places on a Friday night. Maybe they're not having community options of good, safe, comfortable, healthy options for them to go to. And so Friday nights, not something everybody wants to go and teach, but we did find somebody who wanted to teach on a Friday night, and we set up an arena, and now here we are, 9 years later, where that's still one of our strongest programs. And it's had a lot of change over the year, I will tell you. It's not like we have the same drill team that we had probably even a year ago. It changes quite a bit, but it's a great stepping stone for groups of people who are looking for peer-to-peer support, veterans who want to be around their brothers and sisters, who want to feel more in a group setting, and maybe they're just at the walk trot and they're getting ready to move on to learning how to canter or lope. Horse shows, again, so much fun to see how many people who've taken a hiatus from us for, a couple months, or had moved to a home further away or whatnot, and then all of a sudden horse show time comes up, or trail ride time comes up, and all of a sudden it's like a magnet. And it's another great way just to kind of get vets to, okay, it's a lot of fun, we have a good time, we make a huge to-do of it, and then we can, maybe they're going to want to start to get plugged in again. We have started here in 2013 a program called Operation Mustang, which is the concept of taking a wild horse and gentling that horse and teaching veterans about how to do that. I'm talking about horses that have never been touched or haltered or saddled or ridden, and really letting those veterans be a part of that process. It's a lengthy process. Sometimes it's fast, but usually it's a lengthy process, and it requires individuals that are really seeking that commitment, that purpose. And it's been a very impactful program, I can tell you that. Even, a lot of our veterans who come to us want to start riding Western, and now we've got, again, here in the last couple years, year and a half, a lot of interest in more for English riding. And so we've rolled out special groups of individuals that really want to work on their English riding, whether they're working on dressage patterns, whether they want to school over some smaller X-poles or whatnot. That's all an option for them. We do cowboy camps. Again, the cowboy camps just were developed here a couple years ago. I love the concept. The concept is kind of a drop-in concept. Usually most of our programs you have to schedule, we're planning ahead, our program director, our lesson specialist is kind of designing how that's going to look, what horses are going to be used, they're dropped in on a template. Not so for Cowboy Camp. Cowboy Camp is kind of you don't have to necessarily commit to promising to be there because it's a group of people. We started by offering it once a week, then we went to twice a week, now we're at 3 times a week. Mornings, sometimes evenings. It's typically the same time throughout the week. And then what happens is vets can just come in and watch. One of our instructors, sometimes a couple of instructors are there, but they really are rolling out just horsemanship techniques on the ground a lot with the horses, sometimes riding, a lot of times working with Mustangs and that sort of thing. And again, a great time for vets to hang out, get to know each other, and most importantly, really get to know more about the horses. Retreats, it's something that we found, like I mentioned earlier, that works great for our farms. It's a special time, it's an intimate time, it's a group of people that are coming together, that are sharing something. It might be, we might have a retreat that's set up for a group of Vietnam veterans. We might have another group that's set up for women who are dealing with military sexual trauma. We may have another retreat that is specifically for OEF, OIF vets. We might have another retreat that is set up for veterans and their spouses. It's a common ground where we bring together anywhere between 8 to 12 individuals, and we have sessions, different types of activities, if you will, that are set up from a Friday afternoon all the way to a Sunday midday when they go home. And we're blessed we have housing on our farm, but I've heard about other programs and centers that do it that don't have the housing and have figured out how to creatively find other options. But the whole concept is letting individuals be at your locations more than just maybe a half hour, an hour, or 2 hours, but really letting them stay and live and enjoy your farms. Things that we take for granted, feeding horses and pasture walks. And, just really learning about maybe even its first aid or herd dynamics or all the different things that some of us take for granted that are so meaningful to people that aren't completely horse savvy yet. We also have volunteers at all levels. And again, a lot of our veterans, we have volunteers who start out at Bravehearts. And I was in a barn one time, and one of our volunteers who I've known forever said, "Hey, Megan, when do I get to ride?" And I said, What do you mean? And he said, "Well, I'm a veteran too." So sometimes vets might come in and they just might want to just start out as a volunteer, or sometimes they're going to come in and they're going to want to do one of your programs, and then they might eventually want to volunteer and give back. And again, that's just another option for veterans to connect with your programs, and you can help them and they can help you. So some of our advanced learning opportunities and some of our skill progressions opportunities that we've designed for veterans are, we bring in a lot of different clinicians, horsemen, skilled horsemen, English, Western, all different disciplines really come in, and it's a great time where we'll offer some of those spots for veterans. Sometimes we'll give those spots to staff, or sometimes we'll give those spots to volunteers. Again, we try to underwrite them by grants or fundraising and make sure that they're free and that people can come and spend a couple days with a really skilled horseman. We love to learn necessarily outside of just our own skills that we all bring to the table, but learning from others and then determining how you can incorporate that into your programs. We love freshness. We've had some amazing people who've come, and it just really excites our vets, and it excites our instructors and our volunteers. Constantly keeping the idea of learning, progressive learning, on the table for everyone at our locations. We have a veteran instructor training program for vets. We've done it now for vets that have started at Bravehearts. We've done it for veterans who have come to us from other parts of the country, for individuals that have really thought that they really want to give back, they want to make a difference in someone else's level, and they want to get as good as they can with their own skills. So working with them on their patterns and working with them on how to teach a group lesson and really preparing them, giving them their instructor and training hours. We try to roll out a whole program, and again, it depends on the group if it's going to be the length of time for that preparation, but I can tell you it's an extremely rewarding process, and I feel like we are just so blessed to have some of the individuals who started with us as veterans, and now they are some of our very best teachers. We have experiential trips, again, fundraising for them, taking vets to a different part of the country. We go together, and again, providing them with a really fantastic horsemanship experience has been superb, again, to catapult individuals' levels to a much higher place, whether it's taking them to a cattle ranch, taking them to perform as a drill team at an event, taking them to go watch a futurity at a large horse show just so they can see what's involved with a very high level of horsemanship. All have been just fantastic, eye-opening experiences, and just kind of gets us all a little bit off the farm and just challenges all of us. Community events, presenting, talking about the farms, again, and it's not something I typically ask veterans who just started with us, last week or last month or sometimes even last year. It just depends on the individual, but I find that in itself is very therapeutic, is going and speaking and talking to people and networking about what Bravehearts or what equine therapy or what this particular horse means to them, and then how that, again, might have a ripple effect and help another veteran. Constant communication. We do a lot of flyers and conference calls and Friday emails, we call them. We do really try to stay in touch with our vets, and we have a tremendous team. Again, that's the culture that we just understand that if somebody's in a jam or having a bad day or needs to get out to the farm quickly because of what they're struggling with, I can tell you that our crew does their very best to try to accommodate individuals in situations. And that's a lot of times I talk to people, if you're going to work with veterans, you have to be prepared to be committed. It should be heartfelt. It should be passion within you, and you should know this is not always a 9-to-5 position. So I think the rest of these I've talked a little bit about, so I'm going to go cruise on over to the next slide. What diagnoses are most common that we see at our farms? Obviously, PTSD is probably the most common. Sometimes it's paired with other physical, cognitive, emotional diagnoses, military sexual trauma, traumatic brain injury, anxiety, substance dependence, major depressive disorder, spinal cord injuries, physical disabilities, visual impairments, bipolar. Those are just some of the diagnoses we see. And again, our model has tried to be over the years that and again, this started with our founder, who said that a veteran is a veteran is a veteran, and that's what we're going to be, who we're going to be set up to serve. And so it hasn't always been easy. If we've had someone come to the farm and we haven't had the right staff or the right horse or the right equipment, we usually get right to work on it so we can make sure that never happens again. Sometimes if somebody comes to the farm, and maybe especially in those early years when we didn't have certain things that maybe we did need to accommodate individual as safely and as successfully as possible, you have to be a little creative with it. You still have to figure out some way, most importantly, to connect a person to a horse. So, meaning if they show up and they don't have maybe one of your forms signed, maybe they don't have, maybe they're too large for the horses in your herd. Maybe you don't have a hydraulic lift and you don't feel like getting them on or off a horse would be safe. I'm not saying that you should ever push yourself past a point of being comfortable or, most importantly, safe. I'm just saying that sometimes there's other options before just saying, sorry, we can't help you, that you can think about. Can I take them in the barn and give them a barn tour? Can we pull a horse out and groom a horse? Can I tell this person about this horse's story? Can I put somebody in a round pen? You know, can we do a leading exercise with this horse? Can I show him how to put a halter on? Can I talk to them about what our horses are fed? Can I find out more about who they are and why they've come to our farm and really what they're looking for? Sometimes it's even just being at the farm. Sometimes it's even just seeing the horses and smelling the horses and touching the horses that, you know, for a first visit, if you're not completely prepared, that still the goal should be that hopefully you've made enough of an imprint or an impact that they would like to, you know, possibly consider, or you've maybe opened their eyes to discovering, learning more, and coming back. What does your volunteer program look like? That's another one that we get a lot of, that question as well. So, and sometimes individuals say, are your volunteers for your veterans different than your volunteers that you have for hippotherapy or for therapeutic riding? And what we've done is we always train everyone the same. So that means we start everyone in the same capacity, and then we progress them all up the trail to becoming more and more skilled in their roles, either as leaders or sidewalkers, or sometimes even in different positions in the farm. But we don't really differentiate between veterans or hippotherapy or therapeutic riding. We will have in-services, we will do trainings, we will answer questions about how our services are different, but we still want volunteers to have a good understanding of what safety entails. To me, an emergency dismount doesn't change from any of those demographics that are programs that I just mentioned. For me, handling a horse doesn't change how your horsemanship, how your timing, how your feel is, when to give a release to a horse, all of those key components. It doesn't change whether you're working with a veteran or a participant, a client that's in hippotherapy. So we have different levels of our horsemanship. We have our volunteers. We have about 9 different levels of our training for volunteers. And again, our motto is just all about progression and developing horses, volunteers, participants, even our staff. If we want to stop learning, I think then may as well not be working with horses, because it's a lifetime of learning. So we usually start individuals, volunteers, getting them acclimated as far as a new volunteer and teaching them how to become a sidewalker. We progress them up into a grooming and tack training. We progress them up into becoming a registered leader. We have a catch and release program for how they handle the horses coming in and out of the barn. We take them on to a registered leader 2 training. We take them on to becoming an advanced leader, and then an exercise rider, and then a mentor leader. Sometimes the order can change a little bit, but for the most part, it's fairly progressive. They can stop at any point. They can continue on. They might take a break and want to come back. And I can talk more at a later point about why and what are some of the things that we do in each of those types of trainings. But it's basically allowing people, teaching them a skill set, and then making sure that they have that they've learned it, that they understand it, that they can incorporate it into your sessions, and then, seeing if they want to go up a notch. So it's been really exciting. Again, our volunteer program is all based on, it's just a learning curve of us over the years of thinking about our farms and what do we need and what's the best way to help people get there. And I can tell you that in doing many, many volunteer trainings over my, I think 26 years being involved with programs and PATH and so forth, most people, once they get to about an hour and 10 minutes, they're pretty much capped out as far as maybe holding their attention span, maybe that long if you do have a horse with your presentations and with your training. So that's why we try not to overload them. We try to really let them gain the information, the content that we teach, and then we practice. We go out in the arena. It's not just a PowerPoint presentation when we're working with volunteers. We really get in the arena and we really try to cover some ground. And our trainings are set up with really trying to answer questions and taking time for recognizing volunteers' needs in the moment. As we all know, things in programs are constantly changing, lots of moving parts. And so, what is the current, challenge that we need to work on, that's happening in our programs right now? And then how, as a program, are we going to respond to that? How are we going to change that? Do we need to have an additional training? Do we need to relabel all of our cinches and surf singles? Do we need to have more charts with, our saddles, our bridles labeled well enough that people can understand them? So really just thinking through those, not just for that individual and their concern, but part of the big picture and how we're going to get a solution to correct that going forward. Why do horses work? This is a question that I seem to get when I do presentations a lot, and I'm sure a lot of you all have a lot more answers and responses to this, but these are just some of the things that in our grants and in our presentations, and sometimes I've heard a lot of veterans talk and speak to, and maybe you've gotten to hear these too personally in your sessions, so you know and live and believe them. But horses are very special. They don't ask questions. They provide challenges. They help us all become trustworthy people. A lot of veterans talk about how it's just in the moment mindfulness. It's really taking their full attention and holding them in that moment with that horse. Horses teach us compassion and partnerships. They reduce anxiety. They slow our heart rates. They require us to, otherwise we're not going to get very far with them. They're engaging. There's always something to learn. When we learn about horses, we can study pressure and release, and that is just the same with our human relationships. They provide vocational and recreational skills. They give us camaraderie where we can really have some awesome peer-to-peer opportunities for veterans. And a lot of individuals talk to our staff and myself that they try horses because nothing else worked. It's their last resort. And so again, we take that very seriously. We know we've got one shot to get it right, and we don't want to that person that might be at that place of thinking this is their last resort to not have it be successful, to not have it be empowering, to not have it be fun, to not have it be safe, to not have it be something that gives them just a little bit of relief from maybe where they're at in their life. Veterans often say that they wish that they would have heard about us earlier, and again, I think that's the shared mission. We're all in this together, that we're all trying to do quality services. Horses are relatable, and I could go on and on about wild horses and Mustangs and why they're especially relatable for veterans, but maybe we'll save that for a later time or for some questions. So how do we select horses at our farms? That's also a question. And again, I don't want to spend too much time on this because I know a lot of you all are so good at what you do and you've been running programs for decades, or maybe you're brand new and you just have a ton of good feel and insight and you're a tremendous horseman. But when I'm looking at our herd of horses, our horses, we have about 45 horses between two farms. We operate year-round. I'm looking for diversity. I'm looking for soundness. I'm looking for, I don't want to set limits on our horses. So a lot of times I want them to be able to be diverse, whether it means I'm taking them from one farm to another, or whether our staff is using them for hippotherapy and then they're going to go over to a trail ride with some veterans, or so just really making sure that it's a horse that has potential to to do many different services. Because if you're going to work with veterans and you want to service more people and your program you eventually want to grow, you're going to want your herd to have some depth. It's hard to have that one horse who's maybe not always sound and can't trot and can't lope, because that won't work for most veterans. They're going to want to progress. That is something that we should all want to do. So we screen in person for our horses. We get a lot of asks, every day of people wanting to give us horses. We have a form that we've created so that that can kind of take, some of the burden of returning phone calls and having lengthy conversations with people who want to tell you all about their horses. So we'll do an online form, and then if we want to return their call and find out more, then the next step is going and actually looking at the horse, and again, making sure there's no pre-existing medical conditions. Again, we're on very tight budgets, limited resources. If there's going to be a lot of support care needed for the horse, for our particular situation, it's usually not ideal. We want the animal to have good movement. We want them to have a great mind, a good, kind eye, and we want them, like I said, to be able to use them for different programs, whether it's children, whether it's adults. We service not just veterans, we also service families. So again, just making sure, and we also have a lot of diversity in the size of our herd. So we might have smaller horses and we might have big giant draft horses that we ride. And so having, again, that variety of herds, so that, again, if somebody shows up and it's their last stop, this is kind of, they're coming to you because nothing else worked, and you don't have a horse that might fit them, you have to be aware of that, and you have to think through, well, wait a minute, now that's happened to our center now once, twice, 3, 4 times. If we're in the business of serving veterans, what are we going to do long term to help answer those people? Okay, so let's talk about how do you keep your horses sound. So when we take a horse into Brave Hearts, we really look at that horse as part of our family. We want to make sure that we are particular about how we select them. If we bring them in and we're going to invest time in training and conditioning and, getting that horse his equipment and all of those kind of needs that are going to be met, we want to make sure we're looking to bring the horse in for the rest of his life, for the rest of his career. And by that, I mean that we recognize that when we bring a horse in, they're truly a part of our family. That means they're a member of our community. That means that certain people are going to attach themselves to a horse. A veteran, that might be what's getting that person to come out of their house, is because you have that one horse in the barn that is the draw for that individual, or the volunteer, or the staff member, or the board member, or the donor. And so really recognizing people are going to get attached to the horses, and understanding that you want to do everything in your care to make sure that you keep that horse safe and sound and comfortable. So we do saddle fitters. They come out once a year. We take every piece of equipment, English, Western, Sur Singles, every horse. We take them out and we make notes, and we determine what is the best pieces of equipment between pads and saddles that is going to work for that horse to keep them most comfortable. All of our horses are on massage schedules. Some of them even have their own masseuses or different masseuses that work best for them. They might be on an every month schedule. They might be on every 3 months. They might be on every week. It really just depends on the horse and their needs and maybe what they're going through. Equine dentistry, some horses it's once a year, some horses it's twice a year. Again, we have a couple different dentists that we use that, again, are work better with certain horses. Nutritionists, we have our hay is tested. We have our nutritionists come through the barn and work with our barn manager regularly. Really, again, making sure we do feed our horses the best possible hay quality that we can buy. That's a priority for us in our budget. And the best possible grain product. And we're very particular. We're very dedicated to our feed program. Knock on wood, we spend more on that end for the best for the horses, which I think is certainly what they deserve. If they're working and you expect them to perform at their peak, and I do look at therapy horses as being performance horses, you have to fuel the machine, and you have to do it well, and it's got to be quality, it's got to be well balanced, and that's something you really want to look at is the nutrition of your horses. Are they getting gastric ulcers? Are they light or too heavy? Are you not supplementing them as you need to? So take a look at that. Best possible farrier services or horses. We don't just set a schedule of every 6 weeks or every 8 weeks. We look at the individual. We look at the weather. We look at how much moisture is in the ground, what they're eating, and we really base our farrier services based on need as far as what the horses require. And again, not every horse can go on an every 6 week schedule. It's just not doable, especially if you have some geriatrics. They might need a little bit less taken off more regularly. We do as much turnout time as possible. We love for our horses to get out of the barn, get on in pasture or in paddocks, or get outside, be in a herd environment, have a buddy is really important. We have all of our sessions are scheduled around our break weeks or blackout weeks, which again, we try to keep that downtime, not just for our staff and volunteers, but for our horses as much as anyone. Exercise, riding, and conditioning. We just don't want our horses just to keep going around and not get a good schooling time in. So making sure that we've got people that are skilled and committed to helping that animal stay well conditioned, keeping them supple, making sure their departures are off on the correct leads, and that they stay soft and comfortable and are just having a good, happy work. Some of our horses have custom equipment depending on what their needs are. We're pretty particular about our footing and watering and how we handle those arenas and making sure that they try to stay soft and level. Our loading areas, our ramps where we put people on the horses, we typically have them smaller with the intention that if we need to build them up to get them for some of our larger horses, we can do that. But we don't have large ramps because what we've noticed is when we used to have those, people would actually drop on the horse's back, even if it's just, 2 or 3 inches. If you can imagine somebody coming down on a horse's back, how that could really sour that horse in that loading area. So we have smaller ramps or loading areas, and then we build up to them as we need to. And then our volunteer training programs were just really dedicated to making consistent horsemen. I got to talk fast because I think we're over time, but how do you maintain boundaries with veterans? We schedule sessions, and then sometimes we have scheduled, unscheduled sessions, if you will. Like I talked about our cowboy camps, which is kind of a time where people can just drop in if they're that kind of person that really, has a fluctuating work schedule or home life or family life. We require all paperwork is completed. We do it at the beginning of the year. Every year, we're pretty emphatic on that. Respecting templates. So if somebody's on the schedule or not on the schedule, or a horse is listed, that we try to follow that. Our staff has worked very hard to create the design of what would be the most ideal session, and we really try to stick to a good plan. As we all know, things happen. Things change. We try to be flexible, but we try to start with the intention of having a really good plan. We schedule tours. A lot of times people drop in, hey, how are you doing? It's really hard on our staff, and they're trying to stay focused on what they do. A lot of times we'll tell people, hey, we're so glad you came out. Is there a way we can get something scheduled for you or whatnot? Again, we all know how much time tours can take. So we just try to respect people's time and vice versa, have individuals respect ours. Recognizing the credentials of our staff and instructors, how long they've worked to get there, what they bring to the table, being consistent with our policies in-house, and just identifying our culture. Again, if we have things that pop up through the year, we will implement those into our paperwork, and we try to always learn from previous issues. Don't just sweep it under the table. Think about it, digest it. You know what? How could I prevent that from happening? Because if it happened once, it'll probably happen twice. Some of the controversial topics that a lot of people call us about are the weight policy. How do we handle that? We have a wide variety of horses. We do require people in their paperwork to list their height and their weight. And we try, like I said earlier, about all of our soundness for our horses. So Our service dog policy, they have to be in their gear. We are starting to look more closely at that just because now we have so many dogs on the property, and how those dogs interact with one another is something that we're trying to work through those proper channels. Drug and alcohol use is not allowed on our property at all. If we see somebody who looks like they have used, we tell them, sorry, you can't ride today, we can't have you at the farm. If we need to set them up an Uber or a taxi or get them home safely, we will. And follow up with them the next day. Hey, we'd still love to have you back. We got to have you sober, kind of conversation. Dishonorable discharge. Our policy is we let all veterans into our farms once they've completed that paperwork. And we do require background checks for veterans who are going to volunteer or do anything outside of the norm of Brave Hearts. So I'm sorry if I went a little bit over time. I just want to thank you all each so much for what you're doing in our industry, for your dedication and for learning and for your commitment to veterans. I believe there is no better work that we can do as therapeutic instructors and as therapeutic riding centers than servicing our military veterans who have done so much to defend all of our freedoms. If we can return that in just a tiny way back to them, they're just an amazing group of people that have truly touched my life and have certainly done a whole lot more for my understanding of what we really have the capacity to do in our industry. So thank you, God bless you, and I look forward to your questions. Thanks.
First question came on early in the program, or your presentation, Megan, asking, do you use join-up techniques?
We do use join-up techniques. Basically what we have done is we had the opportunity, myself and some of our staff have had an opportunity to study with a number of different well-recognized clinicians that do groundwork and horsemanship. And so what we've done is created our own hybrid model, if you will. And we don't necessarily call it join-up, we call it foundation horsemanship. And we do quite a bit of round pen work with veterans and with our horses.
Someone's curious about cowboy camp. Is it more observation or is it more hands-on?
That's a great question. It's a little bit of both. It initially started out where it was more observation as we're getting so many returning people and getting our horses progressing even further along. It's becoming more hands-on. It depends on who shows up. It depends on their level of comfort. Sometimes some people want to observe, some people want to participate. So it's one of those scenarios because it isn't specifically programmed where we put it on our template and we have a set schedule like we do for a lot of our other lessons. Cowboy camp is a little more flexible, and I think in a lot of ways that works really well for a number of veterans who just want to come in a casual fashion. Maybe they'll get there, maybe they won't, and maybe they're up for participating, maybe they just want to watch. It's totally volunteer and up to them in the moment as far as what they want to do.
I just like the name of it. Next question. What does the insurance look like for the overnight type programs?
So for our retreats, before we started doing retreats at our farms, we worked with our local fire department and got everything up to code. There was some work that we had to do for getting our facilities all approved to have retreats. Things that we had to add, like emergency lights and exit signs and some of those kind of things in our houses. And then once we got the full coverage or clearance from our fire departments and again do our annual inspections, that sort of thing, then we were able to start hosting retreats.
Delirious asks, how long is the Vet Institute program?
The Veteran Instructor Program?
Yes, I'm sorry. She abbreviated it, so yes, I'm sure that's what it is.
Our instructor certification program, really, it's usually small groups of people. Usually we're mentoring anywhere between 4 to 6. And again, it depends on what they're coming into the situation with, how much experience they have, and how driven the group is. Sometimes I've had groups that really want to get going and they want to, every day work on it. And then sometimes we have other things come up where, especially in our last group where we were working with a lot more individuals remotely, it took a much longer period of time because they were doing video submissions and we were doing lots of conference calls and that sort of thing. And so they were doing a lot of work at their own centers. So that our last group took a little bit longer. But again, it's I just try to stay really flexible, really in the moment, and work with, a lot of times go into it with some objectives and a plan, but certainly be flexible to always set it up so that it is as successful as possible for both people and horses is kind of my motto.
Now, Megan, yesterday we had a terrific presentation from Anita Shikady, who's known for her work with TBI, traumatic brain injuries, and she also talked about her work with PTS and said they required different support staff and methods. Now, in scheduling volunteers for sidewalking or leading support when you get a new veteran, how can you juggle these different approaches and needs for TBI and versus PTS?
Yeah, that's a great question, and sometimes they run hand in hand. Sometimes people will have both of those diagnoses as well. We really do well. First of all, we have a lot of our veterans now who are also instructors and are personally helping guide us as well because they're personally living with PTS and also have dealt with a TBI for a number of years. So a lot of times we're relying on our instructors who have also personally experienced those diagnoses and kind of helping our groups from the VA hospitals as they come in, and also giving that in the moment one-on-one coaching if we need to with an instructor. We don't know at our center. We don't always know who's going to come off the bus. So meaning we have VA hospitals that bus veterans to us, and it's not like we have a list of we're going to have 5 people with TBIs and 2 people that are dealing with MST and 1 person that's dealing with substance abuse. We will literally get people, they show up, we get their paperwork. Our instructors and our program director is going through it quickly and trying to determine the best scenarios for the safest situation for this particular horse, this set of volunteers, and this instructor. We try to, again, we have a number of different instructors who help us at Bravehearts, and we try to look at what their strengths are. Are they really dialed in with the PTS community? Are they really dialed in with TBIs? Do they like to work with amputees? Whatever. If they've got some areas of interest, then we try to get those veterans, those students, those specific VA groups underneath those instructors.
Okay, well, thanks. Another question is asking, how many hours of training do you require for new volunteers?
For brand new volunteers, when they very first come into the program, our initial sidewalking session is about 2 hours. They do a little review test at the end of it, and what we found is, again, we keep it pretty basic when we're first trying to get them started at Braveheart, and most people, unfortunately, don't have an attention span of over an hour and a half. It's pretty hard for them, and again, if you're not a horse person or haven't worked around individuals with various diagnoses, it's a whole lot of information for them to take in from the get-go. So we really try to get them the main core fundamentals of what being a sidewalker entails. And then, like I said earlier, if they want to tailor it up and go on, which the majority of our volunteers do, they are craving education and information, and then they will level up and they will go to the next training. Some of our higher level trainings, actually we meet monthly, and those trainings can go, those are intense people that really are dedicated to horsemanship and consistency in our programs. And some of those trainings, because they want it, I've been in those trainings where we'll spend 4 hours working with different horses and different exercises just because they're so engaged. But that's a group of 10 to 15 people of our advanced leaders that they live and breathe. They love those. They look at those as those of us horse people would look at like a clinic.
Let's take one more question as the time is running out on us, Megan. But Debbie is saying they're looking to bring a Mustang trainer to their center. Any suggestions on finding one?
Finding a Mustang trainer, is that what you said?
Correct.
Okay. I would, how I look at people is watching them work, how the horse responds to them. Certainly, knowing people in the horse industry and, who they've maybe studied under or worked with is helpful. But the horse is really the answer. Watching how he takes it, how their feel is, how their touch is, how their relationship is, how they value horses, how they talk about them, how they think about them, how they look at horses, is really important. And I'm always looking at both people and horses to think about them having limitless potential, not putting labels or stereotypes or he's never going to be this or she's not going to be able to do that, but thinking about that's up to us, how far we can really take a horse or maybe even a person.
And with that, I would echo the sentiments of one of the recent posts in the session discussion. Amazing, wonderful presentation. So, Megan, thank you very much for your time, and wish you the best in your future endeavors.
Thank you all so much. Best wishes and God bless.